Mini episode 862 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
I'm going to give you an overall critique, though, of the escalation that I think is going on both sides. Tell me what you think about this.
Okay.
The thing about Obama is that I think it's not that he never fought back, but it was in a way where I think it was more passive-aggressive. There would be copious mentions of, the Fox News people beating me up all the time, and that Rush Limbaugh, what are you going to do? There was a lot of passive-aggressive stuff, which is interesting because for as much as, and let's leave Fox News and MSNBC night times out of this, because those are supposed to be the opinion hours, whatever. But when you're looking during the daytime, one of the things here, and I saw this with Fox and Friends back in the day, you go further back, it was the way they treated the Bush critics and then the Obama administration. What Fox and Friends in particular have specialized in is basically like passive aggressiveness. Coming up next, some people say Obama wants to kill all Americans or whatever. Well, I'll take a fair and balanced critique of this, that kind of stuff.
When you're saying passive, I think we're using the phrase. What do you mean when you say? Because I wouldn't say Obama was passive aggressive at all. I would say that he just ignored the things and made fun of people who were attacking him.
Well,
when you're saying passive aggressive, what do you mean?
You say tomato, I say tomato. It's not a thing where he would get up there with a bullhorn and scream that, Sean Hannity should have his throat cut, but it's a thing where he was making clear what he thought of them, not in the way that Trump does, but it's a thing where when I talk about escalation, here's what we got now. Trump is out there. Okay. He is the unfiltered id, basically. He is, again, we go back to, the great sketch show Key and Peele here with the Obama anger translator.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, Trump is his own anger translator and usually on Twitter. So you have that. But it's a thing where I got to say, the way that it's going here, and I've noticed this because largely because I find Fox News, on my side of the spectrum, I find Fox News to be tiresome and predictable. I watch them the least out of the three. I tend to watch a lot of Morning Joe. I watch a decent amount of CNN. And what I have noticed over a period of time here is, I think, first of all, let me stipulate this. I'm going to stipulate this and say Trump's making a big mistake because the media always wins in the end. I'm a cynic, man. I'm a cynic. You don't win by declaring open war and trying to carry it off that way. This will not end well for him. But what I couldn't have foreseen is I'm watching CNN, I'm watching MSNBC, and yes, they've both been targeted in the last week here, but when I'm looking at statements being put out in response, to the things that Trump has said about them, when I cannot distinguish between what the president of CNN or MSNBC or whatever the case may be and what the DNC might have tweeted out about the way Trump attacked Mika Brzezinski or whatever, they are playing right into his hands, brother. They are, but by doing this whole thing of, yeah, damn it, we are the ones standing up to Trump. They're doing him a favor by doing that. CNN threatening to dox somebody that made a meme about them that hurt their feelings is not the way to go about this thing here. They are playing into his hands.
I will point out that I'm not going to defend CNN.
Okay.
Frankly, I don't watch any of it.
Okay.
Because, to me it is all drivel.
Yeah.
It is just meaningless talking points. And you'll notice that CNN is paying Jeffrey Lord hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to defend Trump on the air.
Yes.
That is their business choice. For up to me, they would go back to being a news channel and not a talking a lot channel. But that's another question entirely. I just think that the overemphasis on cable news, that is, it's only watched by a few million people. Even Fox is only watched by a million people.
Right.
That that compared to the vast sea of information, NPR has more listeners than Fox News has viewers. that the vast sea of information out there is way more important than any of these one outlets.
Right.
What's going to get Trump isn't, CNN. It's this dogged persistence by a lot of different reporters at a lot of different outlets. I don't have to talk about the media as one thing, because you're talking about thousands of different outlets, tens of thousands of different people out there trying to create stories.
Well, yeah, that's true, but it's a thing where, and I think my sense is that this by taking on the media frontally as he has, he makes it a much greater chance that this is going to end as Watergate did, and that he's going to get drummed out of office. You don't win these fights in the long term. You really don't. And this whole thing of trying to keep together his 38% or whatever, the people who would stand by him if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue, again, you can't go through a presidency with that. And to circle back around, and we're not ready to go full circle on the conversation yet, but I'm going to reference back what we were talking about with North Korea. That's a situation here where this most recent test, an ICBM that conceivably could have hit Alaska, could have taken out a good-sized city like Anchorage, shiznit's starting to get real here. And as much as we hope it won't come to that, we hope that it won't come to, we got to get them before they get us. But it's a situation where it very well might, and to have an administration where you're pursuing the 38% strategy and F the media and this and that and whatever, when he might become, technically Obama was a wartime president too because of the lower level things going around the globe, but I mean, wartime president in all caps. You can't be a wartime president with, as James Mattis, the General and Secretary of Defense, has said, this would be the most serious bloodshed we've seen globally in several decades. You can't be a 38% president under those circumstances. It is untenable.
Especially because, I mean, you go back to like 1945, 1946. People already worked out the theory of strategic deterrence in the nuclear world, right?
Yeah.
Once there are nukes there, you're deterred. You're not going to attack, right? If Trump attacks North Korea, that is a voluntary thing. No one's going to make him do it, right? The North Koreans are not going to make him do it. They may be mean to them, Yeah, they launch a missile that theoretically could hit Alaska. Maybe it hits within 100 miles of its target. Maybe it carries a bomb or not. We don't know. But the thing is, we were never going to attack North Korea anyway because they have soul under the gun, right?
Right.
Nuclear weapons are very effective. Don't get me wrong, but massed artillery can level a city too. Just look at Stalingrad. So we've already been deterred. For decades. North Korea doesn't want to launch an attack. If North Korea launches a nuclear attack at us, we'd obliterate their country. It's the same thing with Newt Gingrich's fascination with the EMP bombs, the EMP burst. If someone tries to fire our electric grid with a nuclear weapon, they've started a nuclear war and we'll retaliate if it comes, right?
We'll attack them once our grid is decimated. We'll go ahead and nuke them. I am afraid of an EMP attack.
Really?
I think it's a possibility.
Go read the physics.
Yeah.
The higher the bomb, the more the energy is dispersed, right?
Yeah.
Serious nuclear engineers are not so scared of it.
Well, that's one of those things where I think we'd all hate to see what happens if somebody tries.
Oh, really?
It's not worth. Yeah.
Hydrogen bomb fired off 100 miles.
We're arguing the theoretics of it, Colin. I just assume we don't get to that point, and that's the thing where, again, with North Korea, yeah, I mean you're assuming a level of rationality there that I don't know. Can we risk the West Coast on the rationality of that? And by the way, if I'm looking at the state of California,
you're drawing an either or. You're drawing a very strong either or. Either we do something about North Korea, or we lose the West Coast. But actually, if you look at everything Kim Jong-un does, everything he does is based around self-preservation. He has every incentive not to attack us.
Yeah.
If anyone's doing any attacking, it's us by choice.
Well, I think it may be a little more complicated than that, particularly when you're looking at the militancy of the generals that are dealing with a situation there, that if they're looking at it going, hey, is this pudgy young guy going soft on us here? You don't know how fanatical...
You're making a lot of guesses about people neither of us has ever met or ever will meet.
Right. I guess I'm not nearly as comfortable living with them having. And again, listen, you're the guy that's a lot more in sync with California politically than I am. This is very counterintuitive when I'm saying protect California at all costs, because
what I'm saying is that through the history of nuclear weapons, no two nuclear weapons armed states have ever gone to war with each other. Right.
Right.
That deterrence has worked through the entire post-World War II world. And before we abandon deterrence in favor of something else, let's make sure we've exhausted all the other options.
Well, again, I am a foreign policy realist, if nothing else. That realism may lead me to the point where I think we have no other options, but I'm with you. That last option, let's explore everything else. I'm with you on that. There's no question about it. But one of the things I wanted to bring up here, because, and I had mentioned to you off air, there's a couple things here of an administration changes and the shoes on the other foot here. I am chuckling about a few things here. You talk about, California, that's a good jumping off point here. Jerry Brown leading a lot of things, whether it be on climate or whatever, in opposition to, Trump. It's nice, much like, again, decades after I would have liked to have seen it, it's nice to see people on the left discovering a 10th Amendment. I've been in favor of it all along. I've always believed that. I haven't believed that states' rights, just because states' rights were corrupted, in the Jim Crow era, I never believed that states' rights were, illegitimate in and of themselves. States do have rights. States should be able to band together on stuff to stand up to the federal behemoth. It's nice to see people on the left embracing it. Resistance.
I hear you, brother.
I chuckle about...
How about this?
How about...
Here's what I chuckle about.
Okay.
Here's what I chuckle about with California. Here's a state that raises taxes to balance its budget.
Yep.
Invests in public goods. Infrastructure for the entire state, and their economy is booming. Then you go to Kansas, which cuts taxes on the rich, cuts investment in public goods, public infrastructure, schools, etc. Their economy is flatline, higher unemployment than other comparable states, and people are leaving.
Well,
that's what I think is great about California. Great experiment.
Well, first of all, again, if Silicon Valley was in Kansas, I think it would be a different story. It's something happening.
State too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to sit here and take credit for things that are happening, I would say, again, Silicon Valley has a fairly, if you look at the business sense of the people there.
Silicon Valley's been there for 30 years.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is going from the era when Schwarzenegger was governor.
Yeah.
And they were in complete disarray. Because of gerrymandering, Republicans being able to stop any tax increases. I'm just saying that the Republican orthodoxy is if you raise taxes, everything goes to hell.
Well,
we are having some great experiments around the country on that right now.
Well, listen.
And it ain't looking too good for the Laffer curve.
Well, no. I said, let me correct you on that, my friend. The interpretation of the Laffer curve. I've said this before on the show. The Laffer curve does not stipulate that anytime you cut taxes, that more revenues come in. It says that there is. We should all believe the Laffer curve, as it was drawn, should be the most massively uncontroversial thing in the world. That there is a tipping point.
90%.
Yes, there's because again, the fact that we don't have 90% tax rates in this country anymore is not just because OMG, those Republican barons pushed it back. It's because it didn't work. There is a point at which it doesn't work. Now, I said this, and this is a thing that a lot of people would have called me out for during the Obama administration, but I said this. I said this before Obama got rid of the Bush upper income tax hikes at the end of 2012. I said, look, I'm philosophically opposed because I'm not a big government guy. I said, but it may very well be. We're not at the point on the Laffer curve yet where raising those rates is going to bring down the revenues. It didn't. It brought in more revenues. I conceded that. So this is a thing here where, here's the thing, Colin. Guys on the left.
Can I point out one thing?
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Arthur Laffer helped draw up the tax plans in Kansas.
Yeah.
Say that and leave it there.
Well, yeah. And look, and that's the thing here too. Republicans, conservatives, if you want to call them that in whatever instances, they hand the cudgel to guys like you to say the Laffer curve is BS, because Republicans, I've never heard anybody other than me set the record straight on this. I've never heard anybody else correct the record on what the Laffer curve actually is. Republicans can't get out of their own way on that crap. In Kansas, it didn't work. They weren't at the point where it was going to bring in more money on this. And somehow or another, and Republicans, I'll grant you that. Republicans are not taking the lesson from that I would take from it and say, okay, you weren't at that point. And by the way, I would have spent a little bit more time than they did going in studying where they were on the Laffer curve and whether it would have worked or not. They did it on blind faith, and you are correct to chastise them.
But again, you're saying they should have done more study. If you're going to be an office holder, an elected official in almost anywhere in the modern Republican Party, it is an article of faith. Going back to George H.W. Bush, read my list then in taxes, and, him getting spanked by his own party, that it is Republican orthodoxy that cutting taxes is always a good thing, right? What you're seeing now in several different states around the country, Republican state legislators have raised taxes recently, going against things that they said to get into office very frequently. The reality is catching up. People want to have schools and roads.
Well, and I just had this discussion with a friend of mine on Facebook a couple of days ago. I said it might be kind of counterintuitive, but I said, as far as a tax hike or not under certain circumstances, to me, the greatest evil that you can have from any of these perspectives is borrow and spend. I don't like I loathe tax and spend. I hate borrow and spend with a freaking passion. So if we don't have the balls in this country, if we don't have the balls to cut spending, then we do have to, yes, raise taxes, because, and that's where, again, you're right to flog Republicans on this a lot, because it is a free lunch kind of a deal here. Republicans will talk a good game about government, will never do it, but as you say, want to cut taxes, and that borrow and spend is the worst of all scenarios, and I think people on the left and right do tend to agree about that.
Well, okay, but actually, when interest rates are low, let's put it this way: it depends on what you're borrowing and spending for.
We owe $20 trillion, we owe $20 trillion right now, Colin.
Yes, that's a very large number, and it's meaningless, right? Is anyone going to come and repossess our house? A national economy is not a household, right? That actually gives us power, right? Issuing government bonds gives the government, like for instance, the Federal Reserve, the ability to, basically, the kind of macroeconomic manipulation that the Federal Reserve has done to hopefully keep us out of massive economic crises. And, you can argue about the Federal Reserve all day long.
Hashtag Obama's printing presses.
Well, but, they dumped they tripled one of the monies, I forget which one, M1, M2, M3, they tripled one of them.
Yeah.
And it had zero effect on inflation, right? Because of where we were at what Paul Krugman calls the zero lower bound. Basically, interest rates were super low.
Right.
The best time to borrow would have been then. But what matters is what you spend it on. If you borrow money and spend it on things that turn around and raise productivity for everyone, schools, roads, airports, upgraded power grid, new technologies. Government shouldn't pick and choose, but they should certainly fund research and development. The ripple effect of NIH spending is almost incalculable. That is money well spent, especially if you can borrow it at a ridiculously low interest rate, right? Where, I think you run into trouble is when you deficit spend to cover things that you could have paid for. But like running a high deficit during the recession,
and paying down China and other countries that don't necessarily have our best interests that are out there holding our debt.
They're not. That's all. That's a canard.
I'm not as sanguine about globalism as you are, Colin. That's to be sure. I'm not as sanguine about that kind of stuff.
If they sell off our debt, I mean, the vast majority of American debt is held by America. If another country wants to dump our bonds, someone else will buy them right now.
It is, I think, a potential tool of economic warfare. It hasn't been deployed against us yet, but it is something that's out there. It does somewhat kind of bind our hands on dealing with other countries when they're out there scooping up our debt.
I have yet to hear a single diplomat say that the debt that a foreign country holds of ours influenced a single American decision ever.
Why would they admit that?
Right? In their memoirs 20 years later, 50 years later, I mean, you know, it's a thing that's a political talking point. It's not an economic reality.
I'm not sanguine about a $20 trillion debt, a lot of which is held by foreign countries. We agree to disagree on that. That to me is not a minute issue. And generationally too. By the way, generational debts to come here, Social Security, Medicare, whatever. You go out there. I mean, we can say that Pete Peterson and some of these guys. I know people like to paint them as being scaremongers here, but the unfunded, future costs in this country, if you look at it, are staggering in the 20s of trillions.
Well, and it is really easy to make up big numbers, right? All you have to do is change the rate of growth of something by 0.25% or 0.5%. And you know how compound interest works. Over time, the numbers get huge.
Right.
Like right now, you hear this scare talk. Social Security is going bankrupt. Social Security is going bankrupt. Well, if we don't raise Social Security taxes slightly, like we've done in the past, by 0.25% or 0.5%, there'll come a point about 20 years from now where they'll have to cut benefits by about 20 or 25%. The system doesn't go bankrupt. It's just we're underfunding it a little bit now, and we need to crank it up a notch.
Well,
but you hear politicians scream Social Security is going bankrupt so that they can push schemes to privatize Social Security, which fortunately average people are not buying.
Well, again, you say privatize, I say, prolong the growth of it, give people a little more control over their retirement. But that's another thing, again, that I don't think we're going to agree upon.
I think anyone who lost their retirement savings in 2008 probably appreciates a guaranteed pension a little more than they might have before.
Well, again, I don't, from my perspective, take a statist, paternalist sort of view of society. And again, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily right. I'm not saying that people are geniuses out there. I get proven wrong about that part of it on a daily basis. But I'm not a statist. I'm not a paternalistic kind of person as far as government knows best, whatever. One other thing, by the way, I mentioned about the 10th Amendment. I also wanted to tweak you a little bit on this. The whole thing about the resistance right now. My God, all the screaming when Obama was president about, oh my God, these people are secessionists, nullification left and right. If anybody called anything the resistance when Obama was in office, what kind of a racist connotation would there have been put on that, Colin?
Well, the Tea Party. It's the same thing.
Resistance is a pretty current kind of catchphrase, though. It's current.
Yeah, it's Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's what it comes from. It's Star Wars. Everybody can feel a little cool. It's fun.
Right. But on the whole goose and gander thing here, that's what I'm bringing up here. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
No. The Tea Party, there weren't a whole lot of people in the Tea Party. When the Post went out and looked up, they called every listed Tea Party organization they could find, and in most cases there was no one home. There was nothing there. The indivisible, resistance, whatever you want to call it. Most people don't say I'm in the resistance. They might say I'm in my local indivisibles group, right?
Okay.
And my mom is in one in Palestine, Texas, right? It is not a single one thing. Like, for instance, these, what do they call them,
Antifa. Those a-holes.
Yeah.
The ones out there instigating violence.
They're a bunch of jerks.
Right.
Yes, of course. They, on the, when Trump, to me, they are counterproductive, right?
I agree. They help Trump. I agree.
Oh, absolutely. When, on the inauguration weekend.
Yep.
Several 100,000 people came to this town. And it was so much fun. Everybody was so happy and excited. Several 100,000 people came to protest Trump the next day, the Women's March. I don't like crowds, so I didn't go down. I thought the spillover up in my neighborhood. They were great. You know what Fox News covered? 200 assholes who broke windows and set a car on fire.
Well,
right. It just drives me nuts.
Well, exactly. They were doing Trump's bidding for them, the Antifa, and that's a thing where, well, you didn't go to the Women's March because you don't like crowds. I didn't go for diametrically opposite reasons, but we all had our reasons for staying away, Colin. But
There's a point I wanted to make that I didn't get to earlier.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You're mentioning the special election losses.
That's right, yeah.
And, tying it to California and all that.
Exactly.
Just remember, these are Republican seats.
Sure.
That were held by people who were appointed to be in Trump's cabinet.
Right.
And in part, one of the, some of the thinking that goes into that decision is who's in a safe seat.
Right.
Right. I didn't expect to win a single one of those. To me, one thing that was interesting was that the South Carolina one was as close as the Georgia one, and nobody spent any money in South Carolina. If Georgia had flown under the radar, Democrats may well have won. But I think that all the $30 million of spending and all of that got a lot of Republicans out who otherwise, might have just stayed home.
Well,
I was out with a friend of mine who's new to town, new to the political world and everything, and she was really sad and disappointed the night Ossoff lost. But the political hacks sitting around at this happy hour were like, you lose a lot.
Well, yeah. And it's funny because my brother either lives in that district or is just outside of it, and I was down there when the commercials were running, and it's a thing where, my brother pointed this out to me, and I thought this was hilarious. There was an ad that ran that was, and we're going to see more of this in the future because it's very clever and creative. There was a negative ad about Ossoff that ran as ostensibly a positive ad. But he stands for good progressive values. He stands for, he's the kind of good progressive kind of guy that we like. And it was a thing where, like, my brother was talking with a friend of his who didn't realize what it was, and my brother's friend was like, I don't think that commercial's going to help Ossoff as much as you think. And my brother's like, yeah, that was by design. So. Yeah,
clever. I think you can out-clever yourself, though.
You can, but by district, that's the thing. But here's the thing, though. Here's why I'm not as quick to dismiss these things as you are, because there's been all this talk about flipping the House in 2018. If we go back to the last couple times the House flipped, 94, 06, 2010, the canaries in the coal mine were special elections leading up to it, and you go back to the special election for Pennsylvania governor in 91, the one that first put Carville on the map, where they booted Richard Thornburg there. You outright win these things leading up to a bellwether thing that is significant here. The Pennsylvania election, beating Richard Thornburg with a nobody, was the first canary in the coal mine that George H.W. Bush was vulnerable the next year. You saw this in congressional races before 94, 06, 2010, the special elections. You outright win those more times than not if your party is going to flip the House the next time around. That's why I think it's significant, because we've overstated the odds that the Democrats will flip the House. It is still in more doubt than people seem to think in the early days of the Trump administration.
There is nothing predictive. However, I can't remember which cycle it is. I think you may be wrong about one of those. There was one of those cycles where Dems actually whoever won actually lost a number of special elections going into it.
You may be right. Maybe my memory's not 100%. You may be right.
I'm half remembering an article I read a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
But one thing to notice, the thing to watch in the specials is the vote distribution in that district and the voting distribution. And in every one of them, it's been, 8, 12, 16 points more Democratic than it was in a comparable race.
Sure.
And the thing is, people say, oh, the Democrats have to win X, these seats and these seats and these seats. Well, if you go back to 2006, there were maybe 70 or 80 districts that were pretty close, right? Many of which people wouldn't have expected to be close. And the Democrats lost most of those. They only needed to win about 20 of them, right?
Yeah.
The Democrats don't have to win everything. They just have to win enough. And, anyone who says they know what's going to happen is crazy.
I agree with that. There's no certainty to it. But it's one of these things here where, just looking at it from a competitive standpoint, it is remarkable to me. I'm not the kind of guy who tends to think of 4 years as being an eternity, but it's a thing where 2006, 2010, a lot of the seats, and it was a lot of the same ones that were flipping back and forth. And being here in the state of Ohio, a classic battleground state, it's a thing where, in 2006, the major determinant in the election was that the president was toxic. In 2010, the major determinant, a president of a different party, was toxic. And it's a thing where it's remarkable that those elections were only 4 years apart because of the difference in landscapes, issues, and everything like that going on at that time.
Okay, so here's the biggest difference. People talk about the country changing between 2010, say between 2008 and 2010.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that changed was the turnout. And now, I get the exact numbers wrong, but in 2008, it was about 110, 120 million.
Yeah.
In 2010, it was about 70 or 80 million.
Sure. Yeah, that's true.
The electorate changed.
Well, and again, and I just, I'm a little bit more of an elitist in the sense of I'm not a rah-rah guy as far as, big electorate turnout. To me, it's more predicated on, I don't know, are you getting more smart people turning out or dumb people turning out?
No, that's not what I'm saying. It's
sure.
Not that the country changed its opinion.
Right, but it's the turnout.
Different people were motivated to turn out.
Right. But, 06 was a midterm also, so you're dealing with, I think, a lot of the same dynamic.
Yeah, and that was an anti-Bush. The wars were going ugly. Katrina really killed them.
Right.
It's so long ago now. Look, anybody who says they know what's going to happen here in 2018 is crazy. We've probably talked about this before. The people who were elected in 2018 and the people who were elected in 2020 at the state level are the most important races that are going to be happening, right?
Right.
Because of redistricting. Now, the Supreme Court has, for the first time, agreed to take on a case that, in the past they've ruled on race-based redistricting, that kind of thing, but now they're going to rule on the extent to which hyper-partisan redistricting can itself be an impingement on equal rights, equal representation.
Right.
God only knows anybody who says they know which way they're going is crazy. But, for the first time, we may actually have Supreme Court guidance on this.
Very possibly. And when we're talking about midterms, we were just talking about 2010 a second ago here. The last topic we hadn't really gotten to here, I think, was health care. 2010, the way that turned out, the Obamacare election that basically put the Republicans in the House majority that they have held ever since. We're looking at a situation now where, again, as we talked about off air a little bit, the shoe's on the other foot. Hey, Democrats can crash town hall meetings just like Republicans. So you're looking at a situation where you've got that going on, and it's a situation where, again, from my perspective, I am the world's biggest Rand Paul homer. I'm looking at an alternative that he's pushing here. It's a thing where I think the entrenched interests, basically, because big health, if you will, that slice of big business here, they were all about Obamacare, because that's a thing where, the nursing homes, they're going to get theirs. The insurance companies, they're going to get theirs. There's a lot of subsidies in these Republican things here that the Republicans are trying to push through. Rand is trying to do it more so on citizen-based purchasing cooperatives, actual competition in the marketplace, which is something that no entrenched interest on either side wants.
And there's also no evidence that it helps.
Well, I mean,
Right.
we've seen what state manipulation of the markets does. We've seen what warping of the markets by the state does.
Here, for instance, France, Germany, Japan, Korea. I mean, America has the least government-run healthcare in the industrialized world. We also pay close to twice as much for worse outcomes. Infant mortality is up. Maternal mortality is up. Until recently, 20% of our population was uncovered and in danger of bankruptcy if a serious health problem came up. Americans pay way more than people in countries where, if you poll them, they're happier with their health care than we are. That doesn't suggest to me that. Another good example, Medicare. Medicare is a government-run healthcare system. One of the beautiful ironies of the Tea Party movement was the signs that would say, get the government out of healthcare and keep your hands off on Medicare.
That's when I knew the Tea Party was dead. I knew the Tea Party was dead when that started popping up.
No.
And,
it was just they're just as confused as everyone else is. But they've been sold a line. They've been sold a propaganda line. The reason we don't have universal health care is basically McCarthyism. Groups back in the 50s painted government-run health care as creeping socialism. It works fine in Germany, and they have a hybrid system. France has a hybrid system where you have, they run differently. France is more, if I remember right, it's more like Medicare where you have a Part A and a Part B, and Part B is private. The German one, all the plans are private, but they're very, very heavily regulated and uniform.
But here's the thing, though, Colin. It's interesting.
And they get better care.
See, here's the thing, though, is that it's always been a thing where, for anybody on my side that's made the case about, becoming serfs of the state and everything like that, scare tactics, what makes you think that's ever going to happen? Very, very interesting, and I would say tragic, because I would rather that this not happen. I would rather not have the ironclad bullet that I'm about to give you, because there's human misery involved here. But you've probably seen this case over in Great Britain there. This baby basically getting sentenced to death by these death panels here. No, you may not go to America to get treatment.
Well, that is absolutely not what is happening.
Of course it is. Sentenced to death, buddy. Sentenced to death. You must die.
Hang on.
It's your duty to the state to die, little baby.
About the only thing we know is that this baby is probably in terrible pain.
Yes.
Right? That it is a medically correct decision.
The state knows best. Submit to the state.
Somebody was going to make that decision. Well,
Not the parents, apparently, huh? Not the parents. Parents shouldn't do it. It should be the state.
Well, what about your doctor? Your doctor will make decisions that override parental decisions all the time. It isn't the state. It is the medical providers there.
Yeah, but when the
right wing is portraying this as almost the opposite of what it is.
When the government is the medical provider, it's one and the same. It's basically submit to the state. And this whole thing here, death panels are a scare tactic. Tell it to the parents of that baby in Great Britain.
You talk about the state as this monolithic thing. Government is us. Government is the compact that we have entered into to avoid, what's the Hobbesian world of man against man, where life is nasty, brutish, and short. Government is our collectively agreed upon way of getting things done for our own benefit. I'm very sorry for this child. I'm very sorry for these parents. But their own doctors are telling them there's nothing that can be done. And if this child is experiencing anything, it's probably terrible pain. Just like Barry's child. It's not a statist decision. It's poor parents who desperately want to believe something that just isn't true.
Well, again, that's where we have different perspectives on this here. Again, I am not, again, and my perspective...
I'll send you a link.
Yeah, okay. But my perspective, what it comes back to, and where there is this sort of divide, and which kind of makes my point here about how, as much as everybody wants to act like everything is so much more complicated in the age of Trump, it is true, but Trump has come down in a climate that is already polarized on a lot of these issues and everything like this. Again, from my perspective, me being a liberty type person here, again, I don't view the government in the benign terms that you do. I don't view it as this kind, sort of cuddly thing here.
I don't view it as kind and cuddly.
It can on a good day provide some good services here, but this is when you're talking like that. And again, I don't. This is a philosophical thing here. I'm not saying this like in a demeaning kind of a way, but like when people talk about people on the left view government as like a secular religion, I think they could kind of take some of your comments there and sort of use that along those lines.
I'm coming to the United States Constitution. Go read the preamble to the Constitution, which created the state under which we live. To form a more perfect union. Look, I'm not going to defend government bureaucracy. Look, I work for the Texas Department of Insurance briefly. You want to talk about a hellish bureaucracy? Try combining bureaucrats and insurance. But, like car insurance and long-term care insurance, right? But, the thing is that the government isn't apart from us. It is us. And if we don't want it to be, if we don't like the way it is, we elect new people to represent us. I was just reading, there's a wonderful Frontline episode on, it's on Netflix right now, on the Oklahoma City bombing. Yeah. And going through Ruby Ridge and Waco and all of that leading up to it, and the absolutely insane, stupid decisions made by individual bureaucrats and law enforcement officers, right? Yeah. That created these tragedies that did not need to happen, right? Amen, brother. The response to that is to train the bureaucrats better, not to blow up the government building. I would agree, although, again, and I'm not a guy who generally likes to use the term false flag, but isn't it interesting how all the militias went away? The militias were thoroughly discredited. And again, militias, by and large, and I know, by and large, were fat white guys drinking beer, wearing camo, running around in the woods. The 99.9% of the militias were harmless, patriotic people, but they all went away after Oklahoma City. Was Timothy McVeigh really that stupid, or did he have another agenda there? I've always wondered. I'm sorry. Yeah, listen, if I have a choice between a conspiracy and human stupidity as an explanation for what happens, I'm going to choose stupidity most of the time. But I look at who benefits, though, and the people that wanted militias to go away benefited. Okay, if you have a single shred of evidence, I'm very happy. No. I have none. I just have the cynicism of who benefits. Who benefit? Colin, it's amazing how many things start unraveling when you ask the question, who benefits on stuff. And that's where people look at you like you're wearing a tinfoil hat. And that's happened to me a fair number of times in my life. I mean, that is the danger. The thing is that who could benefit? Yeah. Many people could benefit from things that they don't turn around and do. Well, and I think that kind of brings it, full circle here. The one thing that undermines my theory is that, Trump does not in any way benefit from a lot of the stuff that he is doing in terms of his own Twitter account and whatever. And I'm not going to go so far as to say he is a secret member of the Democratic Party, although that would explain a lot. But because, nobody has been more, and I say this again, like I said, I am less of a Trump supporter than you were an Obama supporter. I'm a Rand Paul guy, so situationally, I may find myself aligned with things Trump wants to do situationally, but it's a thing where, again, as somebody looking for progress on my side of the aisle here, it is with great frustration that I see a lot of the stuff happening. And, again, I'm sure there's a lot of glee on your side here as far as what he has done to be self-defeating. And, these are things that I have a feeling that as we're going through the Trump administration here, however long it may last, that's going to be, the safest prediction I've ever made is that this will be a recurring theme in our conversations throughout the rest of the Trump administration, is all these self-defeating things Trump has done to get in his own way. Yeah, he is a fascinating character. It's both, the classic Freudian id turned loose in human form.
Yep.
All of the dark, self-defeating impulses.
Yep.
I think maybe the worst thing you can do is raise your kid rich. You want to raise them poor and let them get the money later.
Yeah, I mean he's a case study for an awful lot of things out there, and again, somebody that and that's the whole. I look at things here, and he may. Again, from my perspective anyways, somewhat here, in spite of his own impulses, may end up affecting some public policy good as we go along here. But this is a thing where, if so, go back to my boy Patrick J. Buchanan, it may prove to be true something here. When he was objecting, and I thought rightly so, to Andrew Jackson going off at a $20 bill. My high school history teacher really kind of beat that into my head, a great love of Andrew Jackson and a lot of the stuff that he did. Pat Buchanan said, great men are often not good men. And I think that's the best Trump can hope for at this point. Good man, that ship sailed a long time ago.
Genocide.
Yeah.
I love a good genocidal war. That's my favorite thing about Jackson. Yeah. Before we go, how about the irony of Rand Paul and Ted Cruz maybe being the ones to keep Obamacare in place?
They may very well be. They may very well be, but here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. If I'm totally in favor of what he's doing, because here's the thing. It comes down to, in the public mind, ownership. And if the Republicans are passing a shiznit sandwich that is basically 90% of Obamacare and it has their name on it, why would you do that? And why it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to do. Well, I know scare tactics about, OMG, widows and orphans. That's not going to happen. It's going to be 90% of the same garbage that's in there now, as unfunded as it ever was, but it's going to have the Republican label on it. Yeah, Republicans are going to own it. They're going to own, the good estimates I've seen, if you remove the Medicaid coverage and you look at the studies that are out there on health coverage and outcomes, you're talking probably about 20,000 unnecessary deaths a year. You won't be able to point to who it is, right? Because these are statistical things. But removing Medicaid coverage will lead to people dying earlier. Well, again,
because healthcare helps you.
Well, and that's one of these things here that, incrementally, and you can't do anything, unfortunately. The things that I think have been, bad interventions over the course of the last couple decades. You can't pull them all out at once because that would be chaos, but that's where, from my perspective, where I would like to see increased competition and basically a greater emphasis on making things affordable for people and less on making them serfs of the state. And I think, however much, guys on your side may think it's pie in the sky for me to say that, I think we'd all be better off if there were less people in this society that were dependent on stuff and more people that were out there basically living the dream. And I think, to me, where you set the bar as far as success and prosperity for society and what you'd like to see people achieve and not be as dependent on government providing, I think that's sort of the dividing line a lot of times.
I'm actually while we're talking, I'm in a conference room in a shared workspace.
Okay.
There are 200 or 300 people here, typically. Some small nonprofits, but mostly startups.
Okay.
And these workspaces have exploded in the last few years because so many people are taking entrepreneurial risks. Do you know what we're talking about a lot now? Is what are we going to do if Obamacare goes away? Mm-hmm. Because a social safety net turns out to make it easier to be an entrepreneur, to take those risks, because you're not going to be left without health care coverage because you left a job. The previous system was not, the free market for insurance was not a glorious free market thing. It was just as oppressive as the serfdom you talk about. But instead of being to a government bureaucrat, it was to an insurance company bureaucrat. And one reason our healthcare costs are so high is the insurance companies used to spend so much money trying to deny people coverage for pre-existing conditions and things like that. Even now, the administrative cost is like 20% of the private health plan, or it's like 2 or 3% of Medicare or Medicaid. Again, I just, if you can point to me a free market, a real free market, I'll take a look at it. But we've tried, free markets for healthcare, and in this country at least, the government provided ones provide coverage that people like, and it's cheaper.
Crony capitalism, though. I mean, I'm not going to defend the pre-Obamacare marketplace because I don't really think that was an example of the free. There's a big difference between free market and crony capitalism, and I think
show me a single industry that is worth a sixth of the economy that isn't going to turn out to be crony.
Well, that's the challenge.
Free markets are a beautiful idea. I don't know if they've ever existed, right? Because as soon as somebody gets a little bit of extra power in the market, they start acquiring other companies and building either monopoly or oligopoly.
And getting in bed with big government to try to squash their opposition.
Well, I wouldn't even not even big government. They were getting in bed with small government in the late 19th century, called the trusts. We didn't have a big government then.
True. Yeah.
U.S. bureaucracy in a couple of buildings back then.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It was a different dynamic.
Money captures power, always, right? So the only way you can have a free market is you regulate it to even the playing field.
Well, and that's going to be the challenges that are inherent that they're going to run into here. That again, much as we might like to solve the world's problems, I think certainly the differences in perspective that you and I have are a microcosm of the challenges that our policymakers face in D.C. there. And I have to say that one of the great things about this here is that bereft of the restraints that were placed upon us previously here in our means of recording a podcast here, by the time old Ricky gets done editing, we're going to have a part 1 and a part 2 here. So that is...
my phone battery.
Well, I will spare you before the thing goes completely kaput on you. But Colin, a delight as always, my friend. Great conversation. We won't make it so long before the next one here, and the great thing about the era of Trump is that there will always be fresh things to chew on here. So, as soon as it becomes...
as long as it's not radioactive rubble
somewhere. Exactly. So, as the shiznit hits the fan here the next time around, whatever's going on here in the world, you and I will be here to talk about it. So, a pleasure as always, Colin. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this mini episode of the FDH Lounge.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, Waitresses, Strippers, Bartenders, Garbage Men, Janitors, Microwave Popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and The Periodic Table of Elements.